A warm welcome back to GlobeTrotting at DJ's Aviation. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. With over 70% unsubscribed and me trying to push for 50,000, your support would be greatly appreciated. When aircraft are launched, the reality is that the work behind the scenes to make such a plane happen is simply unfathomable. From the significant market studies, financial planning, customer consultations, among so many other key areas that make up the moment when the product is officially launched to the public. However, on several occasions, there have been products that haven't really worked within our industry for a multitude of reasons. Maybe this is on customers, maybe some will deem it a commercial failure, or there's something else. Thus, understanding why manufacturers decide to move ahead with some aircraft types and not others is fascinating. And if they've had enough time in the market to develop, actually understanding if they have been a success is all the more telling if the decision to launch was right. During the 1990s, leading and emerging manufacturers strongly desired to develop a new super jumbo to address the 747's dominance in the market. McDonnell Douglas and Airbus really studied their own options, while Boeing also explored ways to increase their own market share. The A380 and 747-8 would be the last real iterations of a quad-engine jumbo and have had a very mixed reception from the public, customers, and analysts. The 747-8 was launched off the back of several fundamental studies that, when you really deepen it, were spanning over a multi-decade period that initially saw discussions take place for a quad-engined double-decker widebody like that of the A3XX. It was known as the Boeing NLA program. Although this didn't pan out exactly to plan, and eventually it was deemed using some of the technological advancements found on the 787 Dreamliner and applying them to a 747 would be a greater benefit to customers seeking a new advanced widebody with also a significant amount of capacity for deployment on routes in demand or maybe into slot-restricted airports. First and foremost, the 747-8 directly responded to the A380, which responded to the 747's success. So the upgraded Intercontinental, which was released for passenger purposes, was released to counter Airbus's response to their own success with the Queen of the Skies. Allowing Airbus to go uncontested in the market was seen as a mistake at the time, and a 747-8 wasn't a clean sheet like the 380, and thus was viewed as a means to offer something quickly to combat the interest in the widebody offering by the European plane maker. Generally speaking, Boeing viewed the 747-8 as a way to increase the focus on customers of potentially Airbus to them, and how they would push them away from the A380 and towards Boeing. This would take time, money, and resources, and while arguably Boeing didn't want their 747-8 to fail, there was likely always, you'd like to think, a realization that the market for the jet wasn't anywhere near what it once was. However, with that being said, Boeing may have been disappointed to see the eventual performance of the 747-8 Intercontinental in the airline sector, with barely a handful of customers ever expressing interest, let alone ordering and flying the aircraft type. While there are some conversations that the A380 is experiencing a bit of a comeback, by the time these two aircraft types made their way into the industry, a lot had changed, and what customers desired for their operations was changing, only further increasing as each year passed. The need for a quad-engine beast such as the 747-8 wasn't what customers were after, and I want to address once more that point of an A380 comeback. It's important to note that for a lot of these airlines the comeback is short-term, and to alleviate some of the pressures felt by delays in next-generation twin-engined widebodies arriving. Additionally, maybe while it is experiencing a comeback with airlines, from a production perspective, that plane is dead and buried, and is certainly now over. Honestly, you can take a look at the 747-8 and the A380 and generally say that Boeing always had one up on Airbus. Why? Because the 747-8 brought along another important variant with it that Airbus had tried to do with their own aircraft but weren't able to formally release it, and that is the 747-8F, a dedicated freighter with substantial capacity to offer to prospective freight companies. Unlike the 747-8 Intercontinental, which is for the passenger use, the -8F referred simply to being a freighter aircraft, and attracted interest from several high-profile customers. The Dash 8F allowed Boeing to capitalize on the new technology's efficiency by offering an incredibly high-capacity freighter that wasn't, say, produced by maybe an Antonov or someone else, but would still be possible for large cargo for your leading freight companies, and also it wasn't inefficient. It would be the 747-8F that meant the production of the Queen of the Skies would outlive the A380 by around a year. Without this freighter, you'd have to question how the series would have panned out, and no doubt production of the 747-8 would have barely lasted a decade. Now, the program has not been a resounding success, but the Dash 8F was another key reason that the plane maker believed an entry into the market of this plane would have been beneficial. And speaking from a technical perspective, the 747-8 is actually an outstanding aircraft, alongside the A380, for airlines that need it and can make it work. Those last few words being the most important. In this day and age, the carriers that fit into that segment are very far and few between, which is why from an order standpoint, it took a lot of work for Boeing to turn airlines into customers, and ultimately it didn't really pan out maybe as they would have ideally liked. It is fascinating to learn why Boeing launched the 747-8. Key reasons include again building a response to the A380 and primarily Airbus's mission of entering the wide-body long-haul market more firmly, while I also believe that the Dash 8F could suitably serve freight companies, and maybe to an extent they were right on the latter part, as well as internally a host of other reasons. Arguably one of the biggest questions that I know many of you would probably like to ponder down below in the comments, and it's why I'll kind of leave it as a bit of an open-ended question for you to explore, is if this plane had been released earlier, what would have happened? Would the 747-8 have been a success? Well, we're never going to know honestly, and maybe to a certain extent it would have, but it's also important to understand that the 747-8 incorporated technologies from the 787, which 10 to 15 years ago would not have been ready for deployment. So we would have had a vastly different aircraft on offer to customers. But let's just say hypothetically we got a firm new 747 iteration. Do you believe it would have been a major success? Remembering that at this time, you had Boeing and Airbus introducing planes like the A330 and the 777. These are twin-engined aircraft, and airlines were beginning to ultimately realize that there were more efficient ways to serve markets and their route network, and for these companies, maybe a 4-engine plane was not viewed as the best choice. What are your thoughts on the 747-8? It's obviously a beast of an aircraft and is the last iteration of the Queen of the Skies, but it didn't quite stick the landing. You can let me know your thoughts down below in the comments. Thank you very much for your support here. I do apologize if I sound a little bit rough. Do think I'm coming down with a bit of a cold, so again, can only apologize for my voice seeming a little bit clogged or sketchy at times. Please take care, do also be safe, and I will see you next time for more analysis right here on GlobeTrotting.